So, as we are considering this great rivalry between Carthage and Rome, we see that we've got. So, this rivalry really kind of defines Rome and Carthage. Carthage was really the first true threat to Rome's survival. Hannibal and Scipio are two of history's greatest military leaders. Rome was a fighting machine. Rome was learning and becoming just this awesome fighting power on land, and it had become more and more a powerful navy. So at first, Rome had an army that was a citizen militia, and it had a democratic government. Soldiers were Roman citizens, and they were the best trained fighting force that the world had seen up to that time. So, most wars are defensive, but it seems that in this case, Rome, by being aggressive, could gain territory and gain it again and again and again. So Rome engaged in almost constant warfare. And I think that would be a good note to add to your notes. Rome engaged in almost constant warfare. They were constantly looking for where they could be attacked, and they'd attack first. So from the fifth, really from the 7th to the 5th centuries BC, Rome grows from just a city there on the banks of the Tiber to the entire peninsula, and then it's running into Carthage. Rome also, as you know, borrowed from everybody, and that's a nice term. I'm going to use a different term. Rome stole military innovations from others, and this is common in history. Today we see, for instance, that Chinese steal a lot of innovation from the United States, and even computer stuff, and we see that happening even today among rivals. So they stole from the Greeks. They stole weapons and armor, some of the styles of the armor. They stole from the Gauls, the javelin, the shield. They also had a chain mail armor. And so this armor was something that, they didn't have before they really went into battle with the Gauls. And of course, even the Etruscans, that first big foe that was north of Rome on the Italian peninsula, they stole military organization from the Etruscans, or they borrowed. I think it's kind of hard to steal military organization, but I think you could say they borrowed that. And so the legion was a group that was a pretty self-sufficient group. We're going to be studying the legions after Easter, but about 6,000 men. So commonly, because there'd be those that were inactive or injured or sick, you commonly had about 5,000 men who were ready to go in a legion. The army was based on muscle. It was really well fed. They were taught unflinching obedience and discipline. So very well disciplined, very well organized. And for the Romans, retreat was never an option. And you even see that when they went into a defeat, like with Hannibal at Cannae. The Romans stood there and they were swallowed up. They didn't run from the field. So a retreat was not an option, and so they were trained to stand their ground. The only option was to fight it out. So often this made the difference between victory and defeat. And I think you see that even with the Carthaginians, because even though the Romans were defeated militarily and lost half their men, half their entire army size for the entire Roman Republic was lost at Cannae, yet they didn't retreat. They continued to fight on. So Hannibal continued for 15 more years to terrorize Italy, and but Rome, the city itself, was heavily fortified, so they never besieged the city. Now, let's talk a little bit about Scipio Africanus. And of course, after he wins at Zama in 201 BC, Scipio becomes Scipio Africanus. He takes on a title. So he is Scipio of Africa, and that's a title of honor. And really he was the guy, even though Hannibal had some severe limitations in that battle, Scipio did defeat Hannibal at the battle. Okay, now they fight outside Zama, and they met before the battle took place, and Scipio met with Hannibal, and Scipio refuses any terms. He gave the signal there that he was going to fight to the end. His purpose was to defeat Hannibal. And so at Zama, each of these men had about 34,000 men each. Hannibal had 80 war elephants, so he had an advantage in the area of war elephants. And Hannibal also had superior cavalry. He had the Numidian cavalry with the Arabian horses. Now, cavalry was primarily used after a battle had taken place to run down the survivors and cut them up. So it was more for a pursuit, but Hannibal used them in a much bigger way than that. Hannibal used them as blocking parts of the other army and using them in a very strategic way. Now, as a result of this battle, and Scipio's men just outfought the Carthaginians, a result was Carthage had all but 10 warships taken away. And they were saddled with a huge tribute. And they lost their huge treasury as well. And they say that the treasury at Carthage was so great that it would take 20 years to build that treasury up. So they called Hannibal the Scourge of Rome. The Scourge of Rome, because of being there 17 years. I've misspelled that. It's not scourge. Let me spell that correctly. Scourge, there you go, of Rome. And Hannibal then was exiled to Greece, and rather than surrender to the Romans in Greece, as they tried to hunt him down, Hannibal committed suicide rather than be taken by the Romans. So he literally hated the Romans. And one of the things about Hannibal is even though he fought for Carthage, and Carthage was a pagan power, Hannibal loved liberty, and he saw that Rome was emerging as a power and that he would lose, along with the rest of the Carthaginians, he would lose his liberty. And so he stood against that. And so Hannibal really has a kind of a noble side to him as well. So the result of the Third Punic War, the final of the Punic Wars, was that Carthage, the soil there is plowed with salt. So the Romans bring in salt, and they bring in slaves, and they carry the salt in, and on wheelbarrows, and also with packs, and they dump the salt all around through the soil of Carthage, and then they plow it in. Of course, salt will keep any plants from growing, so there will no longer be any trees. You can't farm or garden, and so to this day, no one can live there. So it's still right outside Tunis in Tunisia today, and the ruins of Carthage. No one has ever lived there since. Well, Hannibal's warning to others as he escaped and went to Greece was to beware of the Romans, that the Romans would take no prisoners, they would undo all their enemies, to prepare. Rome was going to be the new tyranny. Rome was going to really be a plague upon the Mediterranean. And so, of course, they tracked him down, the Romans did. He ends up committing suicide. And in 148 BC, the Romans now move on and they attack Macedonia. Now, what did Macedonia do? Nothing. They were just a close by area, just to the east of the Roman peninsula. And so Rome was just looking to expand its orbit of influence. And they pick on Macedonia and then send legions there and they take it. So we're seeing now Rome in a very, I want to call it a tyrant, but even worse than that. It's kind of it's just this empire now. It's growing beyond its bounds, and it has tremendous military power and organization, and now they're taking over everything. So we see that really the Roman army is one of their great assets. So we're going to stop there with these notes and now turn to Caesar's Gallic War. And I'd like go ahead and draw a line here in your notes and put down Caesar. And we're going to turn to the book now. So I think that we'll come to the next part with Caesar and the commentary. So we'll close this part and open a new one. So thank you.